Welcome to Live Well, Dream Big. I'm Suzanne Monroe, founder of the International Association of Wellness Professionals, where I've been teaching people how to live a life of wellness, tap into their passion, and go for their dreams for over 15 years. I believe living well and dreaming big starts with ourselves. This podcast will show you how to create a healthy, holistic life, empower your mindset, follow your dreams, and make a big impact. Let's dive in right now. Welcome back to Live Well, Dream Big. I'm your host, Suzanne Monroe, and today I'm doing an Ask Suzanne Anything episode. We've done this before in the past. It's super fun. Our podcast listener and community, everyone out there submits questions, and I just go through the questions and answer them all. And today, I think you're going to enjoy some of these questions. These are things about my personal life or tips that I have, life lessons in holistic wellness, coaching, entrepreneurship, basically anything. And there's some good ones today on things about the pandemic and what my thoughts were on that, imposter syndrome and starting virtual businesses, and even if I feel isolated in my life as a successful business owner. So really good questions and more. We're going to get into them. Before we get started and jump into our episode, I want to invite you to fill out a review on our podcast if you haven't done so already. I know it takes a minute to do, but if you enjoy today's conversation or you've been listening into the shows and enjoying being a part of this community, please go ahead and fill out a review wherever you listen to our podcast. And this can really help others who are on the Live Well, Dream Big journey join us for this amazing conversation. So take the time to do it if you don't mind, and let's jump in. All right. Hello, Live Well, Dream Big community. So excited to be back with you for another episode. Today is an Ask Suzanne Anything episode. What are you going to ask? It's been fun. Our listeners have submitted questions that I'm going to be answering. I try not to look too closely at them ahead of time because I just wanted to go, kind of unscripted and whatever, comes top of mind. But I did take a quick peek and there are some interesting, powerful questions out there. So very excited. And this is, I said, ask me anything, right? So it could be really about anything on the Live Well, Dream Big journey, anything about my personal life, anything. So you guys didn't get too crazy out there, but I think some of the questions are actually really striking a chord as I looked at them. So hopefully they will strike a chord for you too. So let's just get right into them. All right, starting us off with our first question is Sandra Payne, who says, I would love to ask you if you faced any imposter syndrome and how you managed it. Okay, what were some of my biggest fears and blocks to creating business success? First of all, hell yeah. First of all, actually, let's just define imposter syndrome for those of you who haven't heard of it. It's basically feeling like an imposter, feeling like a fraud. And you know what? It usually shows up when you're trying to do something new with your life and kind of get on this path of living well and dreaming big and put yourself out there in the world, right? To follow your passion and purpose. And oftentimes it happens when you are the person who's going to be out helping other people, so that when you go to try to do that, you start to feel kind of vulnerable. And you also start to feel like a fraud because you wonder if, hey, am I actually going to be able to help people, right? Or what are people going to think of me? Or I'm not perfect. And all those kind of fears and doubts come through and you start to feel like an imposter basically. And it kind of what it does is it holds you back from really showing up. And I got to say, this has kind of been a journey for me. Like it shows up at different times in your life. I don't know if it completely goes away. I'll talk more about that maybe in a minute. But in my early days as a wellness coach, oh my gosh, I remember one of my first imposter syndrome moments. And this was back, over 15 years ago when there wasn't much happening virtually yet. I don't think I even had a website. And I was working with clients locally, right, in my local community. And the funny story is, even to this day, I'll go out, to the store today in my local community and people still remember me, still kind of remember me from that way. And they'll talk to me about workshops I did back then. But anyway, I would go to the grocery store, right? And I would, be filling up my cart. And you know what? I would look at my cart and be like, oh, wow, there's something there that I hope no one would see like one of my clients or people who know me. So if I was getting some cookies or anything with sugar in it, or even anything that just wasn't like green, I would hide it to the bottom of my grocery cart. Okay. And my grocery cart on top probably looked like so perfect, had like the kale and all like the fresh vegetables, right? You walk by, here I am with my cart going down the aisle, totally not realistic. Right. And it was because I was probably feeling that imposter syndrome, right? I didn't want people to think like, oh, wow, you're a normal person, right? You're not perfect. And so that was just a funny way that showed up for me, If I think about like years later in my business, that was kind of more maybe wellness related, but in the success of my business, I had the same thing showing up. If I wanted to reach out to partners, for example, and maybe like I had this idea that they were more successful than I was, right? I had these thoughts like, okay, who am I to be, reaching out to this person? And the truth is, it still rears its ugly head from time to time. I don't think these things completely ever go away. The difference is you get really good at noticing them for what they are, right? So if that feeling of being imposter or fraud pops up, it's a little different now. I can stop and say, oh, there you are again. I remember you, old friend, right? And the reason I think it always pops back up is because if you're on the path of always growing and evolving and putting yourself out there, right? And really on this path to following your passion, there's always a next big thing you're going to do. And there's always a part of you, your ego or your small self or whatever you want to call it, that's kind of trying to protect you. So it jumps in and tells you, okay, you shouldn't do this because, right? And that's where those fears and things come from a lot of time. And if I'm really honest, it's actually shown up recently, right? Because I feel right now in my heart that there's some new conversations we need to be having here on the podcast. And as I think about some of them, I'm just not sure if everyone's going to like it. Okay. And I'm thinking, am I really the person that needs to be talking about this? Like maybe these are things I'm interested in learning about or things I'm doing in my own life, but does it really have to do with what we're doing here in this community, right? Why not just keep things kind of how they are now? Everybody seems to be happy. Let's just make everybody happy, right? So I think this imposter syndrome or these fears and doubts, they can come up in different versions at any different point. But in the end, we have to follow our own inspiration and what's in our hearts, right? And really what our soul's guiding us to do. Because if you don't, you're out of alignment. And when you're out of alignment, you won't feel right. And you might get to where you think you wanted to get going, but when you get there, something is still going to be off, right? So it really is about being in alignment. And I think it kind of comes down to, everybody out there, you guys all have like these big visions in your heart, right? About what you want to do and how you want to help people. And you want to move toward it, but that doubt comes in sometimes because you're not totally there yet. But the only way to get there is by taking those small steps. Right? So it's kind of this catch-22. I think the thing that has helped me the most is just remembering that this whole life and business and everything we do out there, it's a journey, not a destination, right? There's this sense we're always trying to like get to some level or some place or, success or whatever. And you can have that big vision. And at the same time, you can be authentic about where you are, right? So the more authenticity that you bring, the more it actually allows other people to be authentic and I think connect with wherever you are, right? So this is idea of like being perfect or being relatable, right? And so if that imposter thing is coming up, it's like, okay, what about this is true right now? And what about that is okay, right? Like, oh, I don't want to put something out there because, I don't have this totally all perfect for myself. All right. Well, what if you put that out there, right? And I think if we can let go of the results a little bit, results of whatever we're expecting, then it changes things. Like I'm kind of thinking about, some of the coaches in our community and they're wanting to put their messages out there. And, maybe an example is like you do a video and you put it out there on social and like, it's something you really wanted to share from your heart and you only get like 3 likes and you're like, okay, like, what was the point of that? Nobody cares. Nobody likes it, right? Anybody have that experience out there? Maybe you wanted to get tons of comments and likes and part of you wanted to be validated that like, you're on the right path. But see, the thing is, I don't think we always understand what we're doing and the impact it's meant to have, right? Like maybe putting that video out there on a bigger level was about like one person seeing it that maybe you'll never even hear from, right? Like we have these ideas of how we think it should go, but what if the impact is like so much bigger than that and we don't even know? Like you might have changed one person's life who saw the video, right? And I think one of the biggest things I've learned is that you've got to follow your inspiration. You got to realize that only a small percentage of what you're doing and trying to control the outcome is really the whole picture, right? There's this greater piece always working in the background, kind of at this higher level, right? So as long as you are following that inspiration and taking those steps from your inspiration, like you're doing a big part of the work, right? But we get caught up so much in those details and those results, but maybe it's just like you're one step closer. Like maybe that video, maybe it had no impact, but maybe it's like you're going to be doing another video, like 20 videos from now, that's going to be the impact, but you never are getting to video 20 unless you do, video 1 through 19, right? But we get so caught up in video 1 that we never get to video 20, right? So we have to let go, I think, a little bit of those results. I think I just went off on a tangent from the original question. But anyway, that was a great question. Love it so much. Thanks, Sandra, for that question. Let's go to the next one here. Maria Samaleas is asking, Suzanne, what is the most meaningful personal and professional shift, if any, that you experienced with the pandemic? Woo, big question. All right. Okay. So personal, professional, I think as I think about, the pandemic, the last few years, a lot of things come to mind. I think one of the biggest things that comes to mind is that, and I think this is probably true for a lot of people, there was some element of like slowing down, kind of letting go, right? For me, it was like hitting pause on life at certain points throughout that time period and really looking at what really matters, right? Again, what's really in your heart and doing that. Because I think the overall message is life is short, right? We don't know always what's going to happen next in the world or even in our own lives. And we absolutely have to make the most of it and not waste our time being filled with fears and doubts and procrastination, right? So on one level, it's about tapping into what really matters for you and not wasting that time doing all the stuff that doesn't. On the other hand, to get there, there's this element of slowing down and kind of hitting pause to really figure out what that is instead of just going through the motions all the time. I have shared this on a different episode, but I ended up getting COVID kind of at the end of things here, not too long ago, several months ago now. And you know what? It didn't just pass in a few days like I was thinking. I'm like, got this, I had to really let go and slow down. And I was kind of like, wow, surprised by that. And that was part of the whole process too. I really had to give myself time to just be and heal and rest. And a part of me was like, okay, we did this. I got to get back to life, and it just didn't happen that fast. So I think that was a big part of it too. It's like, okay, there's those times in life where we just have to kind of let go and slow down. So there's this idea of being more present. And I think that came through in a lot of ways too. I think not just in my own life, but, with relationships, people in my life, conversations, learning to really be more present and be a better listener and observer and witness, right? So many of us were in situations where people just had opposing views on things, right? Let's face it, like there was just pretty much two opposing views out there about everything. And there was a sense that no matter which side you were on, that everybody wanted to kind of convince the other side of their views. And I totally get that. There was this energy though about that, right? And people kind of getting upset. And I'm not going to say I mastered this, but I really learned a lot about trusting what was right for me and also not trying to convince people about one way or the other and trying to listen to what was coming through for them. And because there was so much polarization and discord and everything, I came to realize that like everybody just wanted to feel secure about where they were, right? And like come up with their proof and their, and in doing so, they kind of alienated each other. And I just think like if we were all, again, to slow down, be more present, what could we learn from that? Because sure, apply it to the pandemic, but what about that as a bigger lesson for life, right? How do we start applying that to everything we do moving forward? And that to me is kind of really a spiritual practice that I've been kind of trying to taking on right now too, right? Because before I spent a lot of time just listening to what others are saying, right? Taking action based on what I thought I should do versus, okay, let's tune in to what, where we are right now, what's best for us right now. So sometimes things happen in life, whether it's a pandemic or an illness in your life or some other big challenge, or you get fired from your job or whatever it is. And like, you're in the muck of all that and like something happens, but that something becomes a lesson that you can then go apply to everything else. I've kind of noticed that with like big things in my life, right? Whether it was a pandemic or I remember the birth of my son, like there was something there. But then whatever that was, it was a lesson for later, business. If we can take this step back, I think oftentimes there's something there that we can carry with us into other areas of our life. So that was a good question. I love that so much. And let's go on to our next question from Leah Scott, who actually has a little bit of a story here I'm going to read. She says she's kind of gotten into a certain place spiritually and mentally as she's really gone through this Live Well, Dream Big journey, and she's gone through our IAWP Holistic Wellness Coach program. And she's just found herself more grounded and fulfilled. And at the same time, she's finding it can be kind of a lonely place with like people in her life, right? As less people seem to have that she's used to being surrounded with are now, in a different place than where she is. She feels like she's the person many people have come to for guidance and help, but now it's harder for others to offer her the support or friendship that she might need or want in return. It's kind of like the teacher-student dynamic, she says. Yes, there's something to learn from everyone, but less people are there for her or know how to be now that she's kind of grown to this new level. She's found so many wonderful people here in this community to connect with, but she's just wondering about this in the day-to-day, right? And what is it like to be where I am now, right? Understanding so much about health and wellness and business and, and then having day-to-day interactions with people. Do I find a lot of people to connect with on a deeper level who understand me and include me in each other's lives? Or do we just have the select few who I truly appreciate and then we can equally be there for each other? So I think this is such a good question. And really, again, I think this one's kind of striking a chord. Leah, you're seeing into my soul here on this one. And I really appreciate the question. To be honest, this is something I haven't really talked that openly about before because, you've kind of hit the nail on the head here. I think that whenever you go on a self-growth journey, right, you're improving yourself. You're transforming yourself, whether it's in wellness or life or business or whatever it is, your purpose. In this case, for you, Leah, it's all three, right? You grow, you learn, and you become someone else in a way. I mean, it's not that you're someone else, but you become more of who you really are. It's kind of like these layers get shed off and you get closer to who you are. And those relationships that you've had might have been at a different layer, right? Now you peeled off some of these layers and you're like, oh, does that really fit anymore? And so sometimes these old relationships or conversations or connections, they just don't light you up anymore in the same way. And I'll say, like, for me, the journey has been isolating at times, right? And I think there's a lot of reasons for this, partially because I'm actually an introvert, though most people who know me wouldn't really say that. Maybe you guys wouldn't think that out there either. But it really is kind of my true nature, because what energizes me is not necessarily always being out there with people. It's really having kind of deeper, more meaningful conversations, and like solitude is kind of where I get my energy. So I love, of course, being with people, but I love having these kind of more soulful conversations. And it has felt hard at times. And at the same time, I really value the people in my life where I do have those special connections with, right? I value those relationships so much more than maybe I wouldn't have before. So there's something that it brings to the relationships where you have that deeper connection. So that's really huge. But I think, when it comes to family or friends that are like family, and you've changed, it can be hard because you're like, wait a second, do people really see me for who I am now that I've shed some of these layers? Like, do they really get me? Because like, this is me, not the old me. Why are they still talking to the old me? And what I found in those cases is that there's parts of you that of that old you, parts of you that still have that connection to those people, whoever they are. There's the past that you have in common, or the history, right? And there's still ways to find where you can appreciate that, right? But that person may not be kind of your everything anymore, or that person may not have all of those things. So it's super important for you, especially if relationships are important, is to find those people who are kind of at that next level to meet you where you are, right? It could be people in this community. It could be other groups. It could be new friends. And what it requires is kind of, again, putting yourself out there and making some of those new connections. And I've done that at different points in my journey, right? Been a part of different groups and organizations and really kind of met new people at the new growth level that I was going to. But it hasn't been the easiest journey. I mean, I will say, like, I don't feel like I have tons of people who are like totally get me all the time, right? But I do find value. And I think what I do in those who I have that connection with, and I also find that it kind of stretches you to bring your new authentic self to those old relationships, right? Like, and just see what happens and allow yourself to kind of be fully seen in that way too. So it allows you to kind of still keep growing. And I think you have to kind of look at, okay, what's really important to me? Like, hey, maybe I need 1 or 2 new friends that are working on something that I'm working on, and finding those people and finding those places so that because, relationships and connections, they're like a huge part of actually our wellness, right? So I think that's an awesome question, Leah. I'm so glad you asked that. So let's go to our next question from Heather Britton, who says, prior to having a team and outsourcing roles and tasks, maybe back when I wore every hat, what were my best practices for staying consistent on the days I felt most unmotivated? All right, this is still an issue, okay? No matter how much team you have, no matter how much you've outsourced in your life, like, you still have your stuff and you like still need to stay motivated with whatever stuff it is you're working on. So I just love this question because it can be harder when maybe you're wearing a lot of hats and you don't feel motivated by certain things, but you could still have this later too, right? But first of all, if you're not motivated, you have to look at why, right? Sure, there could be some things that need to get done, but you don't have the people to support you with it. On the other hand, like, what do you really need to be doing? I think in terms of consistency, Heather, like, the biggest thing is creating these big buckets of what really matters for you in your business, okay? If that's what you're focusing on, or in your life. So you have these buckets, right? And like, let's just take for coaches, for example, it's going to be like coaching my clients, marketing, and like doing outreach and sales, discovery sessions, having those conversations. Like, if those are the 3 buckets, and those are the 3 buckets because those are the 3 things that actually really allow your business to thrive and for you to be on purpose, right? So you break it into kind of like a couple of buckets. If you have too many buckets, like, probably, you're adding in things that maybe are not that important. But within each of those buckets, okay, what are the things that have to be done to kind of make those things work? And then from there, it's like, okay, which of those things do I absolutely love doing? Which of those things do I don't really love doing, so I don't feel motivated, as you said, but I could ultimately outsource someday? And do all of those things actually need to be done right now? Maybe I think that I have to be doing like social media all the time, or, writing my blog, or, I really got to say, even at this point in my journey, like, there's so many different things you could be doing out there, but oftentimes it comes down to like 1 or 2 strategies that make the difference. And what I would say about those strategies is, yes, finding the ones that motivate you the most, that are also your skill set. So like doing what you love and what you're good at, usually the intersection of those 2 things is where like you can really light some energy and fire around things. And the rest of it can really fall away, So sometimes we think we need to be doing a lot of things and we don't necessarily need to be doing all those things. So I would kind of start there. I remember I used to have a list of like, okay, everything I love to do, what I don't love to do, what I really need to do. And I tried to find that intersection for myself. And then you start saying, okay, here's some things that, I don't feel as motivated by, but I still have to do them. How can I be consistent with those, but not let them drain me? Okay, maybe I set a task block once a month to just get everything done that I don't love doing. Maybe it's like 1 day a month. All right, I'm gonna do everything I have to do for my business as just like the stuff I have to take care of, but I don't love, and I'm just gonna do it on the 1st of every month or the end of every month. And then I get to put that away and focus on all the stuff I do love. These are just random ideas off the top of my head, but I love the question because it's a good place to be thinking, right? Like Heather's already thinking, okay, what can I start outsourcing? Where do I stay motivated and kind of stay in my lane? So great question, Heather. All right, let's go to our next question. Our next question is from Anthony Lococo, who says, what do I think about internet business versus face-to-face? Advantages, disadvantages, best ways to get started in either? Okay, so big question, but really in today's world, it's not really an either or. In my opinion, it's kind of like a both and, okay? And it might be a little different than what you think when I say that, because if you're going to be online, for example, you still have to bring that personal face-to-face element, right? As much as possible. First of all, because there's so much happening out there online, right? But people want to see the person behind the screen, right? So it's really important to still bring that face-to-face element if you are online. And we can do that with today's technology, right? And then on the other hand, if you want to be face-to-face, like working with people one-on-one, like literally in their presence, which is super amazing, people are still going to want to check you out online, right? Let's say you do a workshop or you're out there in your community doing some education. Even if the person's going to work with you personally, they're probably going to go out and Google you or check you out on Facebook or wherever on social, right? So you still kind of need both. I think it comes down to where you want to be spending your time. And it really does come down to that personal connection, though, whether it's face-to-face or online. You have to keep the personal connection central, right? That's really the big thing. And how can you do that best for you? Like, are you someone who just loves being in those personal one-on-one in front of yourself conversations face to face? If so, like, that's a great place to start. Are you someone who feels like really comfortable on camera and doing video and stuff like that? If so, like, great, do that. Right? But too often I see coaches and other entrepreneurs and people who are starting their own businesses, like, get out there again, thinking they have to do everything and then not really doing any of it well. And there's like this level of like, it's kind of forced, right? So you got to find the best way to make those personal connections for yourself using what your natural abilities are and like what speaks to you. So Anthony is a holistic wellness coach and training at the IAWP. So he's likely referring to a coaching business. And I'm going to say there's nothing like building rapport and connection in person though. Because the minute you go virtual, it's not that you can't create that connection, but there's more layers and you have to do a little bit more work to create the same connection that you would in person, because there's more noise and there's more space between you and the person on the other side of the screen. So it's just human nature that to build that same level of rapport takes maybe more interactions, more connections, right? So that's something to keep in mind if you're willing to dedicate and create those touch points in kind of more of an online role. I mean, I still stand by for coaches that doing workshops in your local community face-to-face is one of the most amazing things you can do in the beginning for a lot of reasons. First of all, you just immediately create what I call the know, like, and trust formula, right? You're in front of the person. They actually get to feel your presence. They get to see you. They get to know you. And it makes very easy going from that to like working with you as a coaching client. So much easier than, hey, if you were just out there online, right? Because now I don't know you. I need a little bit more time to build that rapport. So it's just the fastest way to do it. It doesn't mean it's the only way, and it doesn't mean you should only do that. But oftentimes what happens is coaches will go the other way, where they'll spend a lot of time building their website and focusing on their online coaching programs and thinking about what they're going to put on social media and doing all this other stuff, where they completely lose that personal connection that is really the fastest path to jumpstarting your business really and getting out there. And then the cool thing about doing it that way is, even if you're like, hey, I don't want to do this forever, I really want to do more of the online, what it does is it oftentimes gives you that boost. So now that you have that experience, you have the confidence working with people, you got used to testing your niche or your talk out in front of real people, and now you're ready to, master it. Or, you've now actually got your income jump started, and now you can actually invest in online strategies, right? Because it's pretty much free to go out there and do a workshop in your local community, right? Like, you just need yourself, right? Put on your outfit, head out, and show up. once you get online, oftentimes the technology and different things, it takes a little bit more sometimes. So that's kind of my roundabout answer to your question, Anthony. It's not really an either or, it's kind of a both and, but I think you got to determine which one you want to lean into a little bit more and what is the best starting point for you based on where you currently are. So great question. Really love it. All right. Yana Carson is asking, she's wondering how many clients would you take on or serve at a time that is manageable or realistic in a week? Are there different resources that can help evaluate like the client time ratio? All right, let's get into this. I think this is a great question, Yana. First of all, the first thing is it depends on you. It depends on your own energy and how long you're going to be working with a client, how many people you could actually take on. So quick story is that when I first got started as a coach and I started my practice, I was working with people in person and I was still doing my day job. So I was like moonlighting as a coach. Okay. And I was working out of a holistic doctor's office in my area. And that's how I got started. And I only had a couple nights a week that I was working out of this office. So I had to book everybody in on those couple nights. So it was kind of my block. It was my client coaching block. And I had like 3 or 4 clients, one after another, right? In these time blocks. And it was very effective on one level because those were the times that I was working with clients. On the other hand, for me, it was too much, right? It was too many people at once, so that by the time those sessions were over, I would get home and just be completely emotionally and mentally exhausted. So for me to take on that many clients back to back, one-on-one, wasn't really sustainable. And yes, I had to learn about how to manage my own energy, right? Kind of rid myself of client residue, do some energetic practices to kind of keep me in a healthy space. But it also just wasn't the perfect style or fit for me. That being said, I do think it is really effective to like create specific times in which you're working with clients and other times where you're working on your business, right? So that they're not totally intermingled. Otherwise, like you're never really in the flow and it's harder to get things done when you're working on your business versus working in your business. So that's one thing to consider, Yana. The other thing is like, how long are your sessions going to be? Right? Like, are you doing 30-minute sessions? Are you doing an hour-long sessions? Are they longer than that? Right? So that's kind of takes up how much time, right? Another big thing is like, how many clients do you actually want to work with and how much time do you actually have available? Right? So sometimes when people are first getting started out working with coaching clients, or if you're in another area of business and you're just getting started, oftentimes you have another job, right? You're making that transition. That's totally fine. If that's true, like it was in my case, I only had those 2 nights that I could really offer up to coaching. So I had to do that. So you have to look at, okay, how many hours do you actually have available? And then kind of go from there to determine how many clients could you actually take on. And I like to look at things kind of on a monthly basis. If you're like, okay, I've got 3 time slots a week, and in each time slot I can fit 2 people, that's 6 clients a week. And I'm only going to see clients, every other week. So that's actually 12 clients. I could work with 12 clients a month, right? So that's how you kind of start backing it in. So the most important thing is to look now at your schedule and say, what's realistic for me given where I am right now? And how long am I going to be working with people? Do I need a bit of break in there? Am I going to do it all on certain days? And then kind of work backwards to fill in. That's the best way, I think, to determine, okay, how many clients can I actually take on in 1 month? It also, another thing you want to look at is like, how much income do you need to be earning to make a living or to live your life, right? We'll talk more about that in a minute because I think I saw some questions up ahead about kind of pricing, and let's tie it into that question in just a minute. All right, let's go to our next questions from Simmerjeet. Simmerjeet is asking about some of the greatest challenges out there nowadays that coaches can provide a solution for. That is a great question. And I think overall what we're seeing with people, especially over the last couple of years, is like a new level of burnout and stress, right? That has happened from so many things that have happened over the last couple of years. And what we're also seeing is because of the last couple of years and the level of burnout that people are facing, there's also this like reality check, like, whoa, like can I really live like this anymore, right? So that to me is kind of the greater problem. And you could definitely go out and help people with burnout and stress. But I think what's really important is kind of niching down and saying, okay, burnout and stress might be the bigger problem, but what are the ways that shows up in people's lives? What are the kind of the smaller problems that might be more on their mind? They might be sitting around saying, oh, I'm so stressed and burned out for sure. But they might be like, wow, because I've been so stressed out and burned out, I haven't had any time for myself. I haven't been eating right. I haven't been exercising. And oh my gosh, I'm actually overweight now. What happened? Right? So that could be a problem as it relates to their lifestyle. Or it could be that they've developed, like adrenal fatigue or some chronic health problem, right? Because of the amount of stress that they're carrying. So that's a specific problem. You could talk about relationships, right? You could say, oh my gosh, because I've been so burned out and stressed out, I am now like totally disconnected from, the relationships in my life. And, our communication is off, there's conflict, and wow, I just don't even have the energy to like figure out what to do here. Right? Or what's like another sub problem of being burned out and stressed out? You could look at career or purpose, right? Like you're so burned out and stressed out in your career that you're like totally out of alignment with your career and you don't know what to do next, right? And you want a different job or a career, but you want to find your passion, but you don't know what to do. So my point is, you look at these bigger global problems that are happening and you say, how are they showing up in people's day to day? And then where can I help? Like which of those areas is my passion and skill set and interest, right? You might be able to help people with all of those things, but like which part of it is your story? Where have you had the experience? What like really lights you up in helping people? And then kind of starting there and always knowing that even if you're helping with that smaller, what seems like a smaller problem, especially as a holistic wellness coach, you're going to still be addressing all the other areas, right? It doesn't mean we don't get to address those areas. It's really more about how we're talking about it so that we can make that connection with people. Make the connection to the things that are really, things that are struggles for them on a daily basis. So that's a great question. You had another question as well, which is there is a wide variability in what coaches charge. What are the industry standards? And what can we think about adding or doing that would add value to our clients for which, they would pay a premium for? All right. Good question. This kind of gets into this whole like charging and everything like that. First of all, I just want to say this. I think a lot of people out there are like, charge what you're worth or whatever. And I think, the minute you say that, things get kind of derailed, right? Because then we make it about ourselves, like our own self-worth. And you know what? Maybe our self-worth isn't perfect because we don't have that confidence yet. We don't have all the experience. We got to stop making it about ourselves and really make it about the people we want to help and what transformation they're going to experience. And what is that transformation worth, right? Like remove yourself from the equation for a minute. Like, wow, if I were to work with someone and provide them all of this and these are the results they're going to get, like what would that actually be worth, right? So how do we look at it from that standpoint? I think that's really important. So it's not so much based on what you think, you're worth. That's kind of silly personally, or what you think people can even pay. Like that's probably mostly in your own head. It's really based more on the transformation. I think there's a couple ways to figure this out. One is, again, what is the transformation worth? And when you do that and you add up like, wow, if these were all the things that were going to happen, what would that be worth to somebody? I think you'll see it's probably a lot greater than maybe what you would have charged. But the other way to figure this out is what do you realistically need to actually be in business and keep serving people, right? So you can look at your own life and say, okay, here is, what I need to make to be in business and to live at my current lifestyle. Or maybe it's just to at least maintain. Maybe you have two goals. One is like, okay, what do I need to at least make a go of this? And what is like kind of my bigger vision? Either way, you come up with that. And then you look at, okay, how much time do I actually have available to work with clients? Kind of like we said before, maybe I only have 2 days a week, right? Because the other days I have to be working on my business, or I still have my job, or I'm doing this, or whatever it is. We all have other roles and responsibilities, right? So you take this number and then you take how many time slots or hours you have available. And when you do the math, you say, wow, I actually need to work with 10 clients every month to meet my goal at the current price that I'm charging. So I can either lower my prices and take on more people, or I can raise my prices and take on less people, right? So it kind of depends where you are, how many people you feel comfortable working with, and really matching it, I think, to your own schedule and your life as it is currently, rather than just kind of randomly picking a number out there. Because if you look at the industry standards, because that was part of your question, like, I don't really even know if there is a standard, right? We see people charging anything from, $49 a month up to tens of thousands of dollars, right? I will say this though, is that it all comes down to time. Time is your most valuable asset, right? And when you see people charging less, oftentimes they've created a way to help a greater number of people. But in the beginning, when you're getting started, your network isn't that big. You haven't created that type of automation or that content yet. That's a great place to consider going. But in the beginning, all you have is you and your time, right? So that's why I like to reverse engineer things, right? Charge for the transformation and what you need to stay in business so that you can keep growing. As you get bigger, maybe you have these different price points and options for people. So more and more people can experience, the transformation that you're providing. So that's a little bit on charging. And what do you think about what we can do to add or do that would add value, right? What do people want to pay a premium for? I mean, I really do feel like that personal support piece is what's so huge, right? That's something that's really missing out there, especially as we're seeing more and more companies and things are going to automated learning, AI learning. Like, that's all great, right? There's so much content out there that can be customized to where a person is in their journey, but you can't customize that personal support in the same way. I mean, there's nothing like personal support, having a real person listen to you and meet you where you are, right? So don't doubt that. That is something that's super important. And of course, there's always so many other things you can add to what you're doing. But sometimes we don't value that coaching or that personal support or whatever we're doing out there in the world, like ourselves, that personal element. And honestly, as I look at the world and where we've gone, like, that is the most thing to value, right? So if you're trying to add all this stuff to what you're offering out there in the world, that's all great, but the personal support and the time is the most valuable asset. So that is that question. You also had questions on, is there more online business content marketing strategies and programs that we offer through the IAWP? This is a great question. And for those of you who are just in our podcast listening community, this is a big part of our IAWP Holistic Wellness Coach Certification Program, where we show you how to go through the whole process of starting your own business, tapping into your passion, following your purpose, right? And learning all about holistic wellness so you can help other people transform their lives. And a part of our training includes our Wellness Messengers training. And this is all about how to get yourself set up professionally and virtually and start sharing your message. So that's a great starting point. And of course, also through the IAWP, we have different advanced programs that people can do who really want to keep going and growing and be out there more with an online, digital, virtual business. One of them is through our Master Coach Academy program and our Virtual Business Accelerator. And the other is through a program called Wellness 360 Coach Pro, where we actually set up everything for you virtually. So you kind of just run with it and go. So these are all things that we can talk more about. If these are of interest to you, you can always connect with us further on that. So great questions from Simmerjeet out there. Let's go to our next question from Diana Sailor Crop, who is saying, how do you handle people who think your pricing, back to pricing again, this must be a hot one, whatever it may be, if it's too much for them? Okay. So, I think this goes back to what we were just saying a little bit, right? In the world of coaching, in the world of entrepreneurship, in the world of like selling whatever it is that's in your heart that you're offering to people, right? There's this level of feeling like you're selling yourself, right? And that's what sometimes creates this disconnect with pricing. Again, I think we make it about ourselves. We have to focus on the transformation. We have to focus on the experience and take it a little bit off of ourselves, even though we're the one doing it, right? And part of that means that not everybody is going to say yes to what we're offering, right? So we can make it about ourselves when someone says our pricing is too high, or we could just make it around the fact that it wasn't a good fit. The funny thing is, what I see with a lot of people is they'll talk to like a couple people and maybe someone will say, oh no, the price wasn't a fit or whatever, or that's too much or whatever. And you're going to get a lot of no's and you're going to get a lot of yeses, right? But you got to be talking to a group of people in order to really measure that, right? Like you might have talked to 2 people who said no and the other 8 were going to say yes, but you never went to talk to the other 8. Right? So like, don't evaluate your results and your experience based off a couple of conversations, because any factor could be happening for any one person in any given moment. Right? And we take it so personally, I think. Also, it's also knowing what you're offering is not going to be a fit for everyone, which I think allows you to come from really an open space and saying, hey, is this a fit for this person? Versus like, oh my gosh, I hope this is a fit, right? So that's really important, is staying in an open place about whether the solution that you have is actually something that could help somebody. It may not be the right next step for them. The other biggest thing is that if you're hearing that people like what you have to offer, but the price is too high, oftentimes you didn't really connect the dots between what their pain points and challenges were in their life and what your solution is. You didn't show the value, right? And this is something that takes time. It takes experience, right? We here at the IAWP, we teach about our discovery session process, which helps you to do this really naturally from a heart-centered, authentic place. But it's about being open and digging deep enough to find out what's really going on in someone's life. What is it they really want to achieve, right? And how does your solution, rather than just being for everybody, match up with that? So the best thing you can do is practice that process over and over again for you to actually experience what I mean when I say this, because it's kind of hard to explain. Until you actually practice it and try it out, you'll see what I mean, right? Are you connecting the dots between where someone is and really where they want to go? That's what you need to look at. Sometimes we've created something that we think is the big goal for people, and we're so caught up in what we have to offer that we're not really listening to what is it that they need, right? So we got to make that connection. So that hopefully answers your question, Diana. That was a great one. Our next question is from Steph Lee, who says, what outsourcing would you say was the number one to do to help in a coaching business? We're getting that outsourcing question again. But what should you outsource? So let's dive into that. This reminds me of when I first read the 4-Hour Work Week, which I think was published in 2009. So that was a long time ago. Still a very popular book out there, of course, with Timothy Ferriss and all the other books that he's written out there. But I remember reading that book and being like, what? It was mind blowing. I'm like, wait, this is possible? That I could literally just do what I love and outsource everything else, right? So much was happening at that time in the early 2000s. Oh my gosh, I sound like I'm like dating myself. But really, I had just gotten started in business in 2006. So I was really just getting going, and like so much was happening in terms of all these different ways for you to outsource things and connect with people online that really wasn't there before that time frame. So it was a really interesting time. And I think when it comes to outsourcing, you have to outsource really what your business needs, but you're just not good at, and you aren't interested in getting good at, and you probably will never be good at. Okay. So like on some level, when we go out there in the world to do what we love, like we have to get some new experiences, right? We probably have to add on some skill sets. We have to dip our toes in waters that we've never gone in before. On the same note, we have to be realistic about stuff that like, it's just not in our true nature, and it's going to be an uphill battle, right? Who can help us with that? For example, let's say you were just like not a numbers person at all, like accounting, bookkeeping, like you didn't pass that class in high school. Like it's just not for you. Now, it's important to know your numbers in your business and get really good at understanding that, but you don't have to be the person who's crunching the numbers and then making the mistakes, because that's just not your skill set. But you want to have someone who can help you see what the numbers are, right? So we don't want to turn a blind eye to it, but we say, hey, I'm not really good at doing the day-to-day crunching and keeping things organized, right? So that could be an area. So I think the biggest thing is like, okay, find that thing again that you know is really important to keep your business organized, to keep it growing, so that you can focus really in on what you do best in your business, right? So again, if you're a coach, we're going to always use that as our example with all of our coaches who are joining us and in on this conversation. If you're a coach, most likely, you know, the highest best use of your time is coaching your clients, right? So that's like number one. And then you say, okay, what are other things that are really important that I'm not good at? And that's where you start outsourcing. And you know what? You're like, oh, I'd love to outsource everything. You can't always outsource everything right away, but you can make a big list of everything and work toward it, right? And sometimes you don't even know what it is you need to outsource. A really good activity, like early on and as you're getting your business going, is just to keep a notebook or something by your desk, sheet of paper, whatever, and keep track of these things that you need to be doing in your business. And write down the ones that you're like, wow, I really love doing this. That was fun. Wow, I didn't even know I liked, you know, creating content or something. That's something new for me. I actually had fun doing that. Put that in one column, right? And then in the other column is like, oh my gosh, I had to do that and that was just not fun. And no, I don't want to do this ever again, right? And have that in the other column. And then you can kind of start, you know, okay, how could I get support with this? How could I get support with that? Yeah, so that ultimately you can start to do that, but you can't do it all overnight, right? So you got to choose the things that are most important and are going to bring the most value to you right now. And in the meantime, you got to really focus in, as I said earlier, on the things that matter most. You might think you need to be doing a lot of these things, but where do you really need to be focusing your time and doing that? That's really the most important thing. So great questions. And another question is, what am I reading right now? Okay, what am I reading right now? I actually grabbed 2 books here, though I don't have all of the ones, you know, on my nightstand right now is, I think it's called Cloud Cuckoo Land. Anybody reading that right now? It's just a fun, someone else is reading that. I don't know if I even said the title right because I kind of forgot it. I love reading books that are just like totally take you away. This book is like, oh, just, you know, you're going to all these different places and different times in history, and they have nothing absolutely to do really with anything to do with like, you know, live well, dream big, nothing to do with work per se, because I just love to let it go at the end of the day, right? I used to spend years and years, I read every wellness book written, every self-help book written, every business book written, you know, every spiritual book out there. You know, that was just like, I was a sponge absorbing so much of that. And I still love to, but I found for me at nighttime, I also have to kind of like relax, shut down the brain and just read something for fun. On the other note, I've got 2 fun other books here. I have the Lost Book of Herbal Remedies by Dr. Nicole Appelian, who's going to be on the show coming up in next month. Super excited. So she's written many books and has done some really amazing things out there. So Lost Book of Herbal Remedies is a fun resource. And I'm also going to be diving into Sacred Medicine by Lisa Rankin. This is a brand new book that just came out. Dr. Lisa Rankin is also going to be joining us on the show. Super excited. So check out this book if you want to get ahead. But these are going to be just amazing books in the area of holistic healing and some of the fun topics I want us to get into next. So those are some things that are on the nightstand right now. Never enough time to read all the books on the list, that's for sure. All right, amazingly, that is all the questions that came in. We went through them all. Woohoo! So I want to thank everybody for joining us for this episode today. It was so much fun being here with you on Live Well, Dream Big and answering all these questions. Bye, everybody. See you soon.
Thank you for joining me for today's episode of Live Well, Dream Big. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation, and I want to invite you to take your next step toward living well and dreaming big by downloading the Live Well, Dream Big lifestyle book. It's the ultimate guide to becoming your best self and living life on your own terms. You can grab your complimentary copy by going to the link in the show notes or heading directly to iawpwellnesscoach.com/guide. That's iawpwellnesscoach.com/guide.